let's talk about the four energies that are incorporated in the biocharger.
Sure. So we have an electric field that emits from the top. We have a magnetic field, or PEMF, that emits at the base. We have radio frequencies and harmonics, and we have a light component. So the idea is, in healthy cellular function, you have these positive, negative charges surrounding a cell membrane. These positive, negative charges create a concentration that trigger ion channels. These ion channels could be the sodium potassium pump, or the ATP, could be uptake of hormones, proteins, nutrients. At the same time, there's this detoxification effect of dealing with the toxicity in the nucleus of the cell. So when a cell becomes less healthy, there's not enough of that charge to trigger these healthy cellular functions. And it's been proven that you can take external electric fields and stress that cell membrane like a dielectric and actually trigger these ion trigger channels to trigger these healthy cellular functions. So normally, with nutrition or anything else, you're adding that charge potential around the cell membrane. But even if you don't have enough of that charge potential, you're really not getting anything to the nucleus of the cell. And a lot of times it's just being wasted away. And one of the big advantages is by making the cell membrane more permeable. When you take those supplements and things like that, it becomes that much more effective in uptaking nutrients and detoxification. So secondly, we produce a magnetic field at the base of the system. So there's many devices that are out there, the PEMF, so pulse electromagnetic fields, and primarily looking at the magnetic field side of it. So if you ever had in a magnetic field, what that affects is those positive, negative charges moving around the cell membrane. So as they're moving around in the body in the presence of a magnetic field, those ion charges pick up an electric charge to again trigger those healthy cellular functions. So you're adding charge to the system through the ion charges surrounding the cell membrane. So in other words, the magnetic field and the electric field are sort of doing the same thing, but in different ways. One is making that cell membrane more permeable with the electric field, whereas the magnetic field is more working with those positive, negative charges as they're moving around in your body. So both of them trigger the uptake of nutrients and detoxification. Thirdly, we produce the radio frequencies and harmonics. So not only is cells magnetic and electric, but there's a vibrational component to it. So in physics, they started outlining what they call the magnetic resonance spectrum. So if you've ever had a magnetic resonant image, or MRI, is what they're looking is within the nucleus of every cell, there's vibrations to it. And every cell falls in a wide range of frequencies from low kilohertz up to 20 gigahertz. And then above and beyond that is what they call the molecular band spectrum. So every molecule vibrates from 20 gigahertz and through infrared, far infrared, near infrared, up to visible light. And that's part of the reason why these infrared, far infrared, near infrared systems work, is because they're literally resonating on a molecular level and generating energy through sympathetic vibration. So what is sympathetic vibration? So in music class, if you've ever seen where they take two tuning forks of the same pitch. So if I strike one really hard, the other one starts to vibrate. Same thing with the radio. If I set my car radio station at 95.1 to a radio transmitter that's tuned to it, I actually pick up that energy of that signal. And it's tuned to one specific frequency. Well, your cell's like this one band radio receiver, tuning fork, tuned to a specific frequency. And if I hit that right frequency at it, I can actually stimulate it through sympathetic vibration and adding energy into the system to help improve these healthy cellular functions. So we're literally generating hundreds of thousands of those frequencies that span that whole spectrum of the magnetic resonance spectrum, that AM, FM, shortwave, longwave, UHF, VHF, microwave, millimeter, all the way up to visible light. And what we're trying to do is really mimic what happens in nature. So, as we spoke earlier, we mentioned about, being outside, and why is that so important? So is it just necessarily that sunlight and the infrared stuff that we get from sunlight, or it's not just the gas excitation of the natural light, but there's also frequencies and harmonics from lightning discharge. So most people don't realize we have 100 lightning strikes on the planet every single second. Each one generates hundreds of thousands of harmonics that span that whole spectrum of AM, FM, shortwave, longwave, UHF, VHF, all the way to visible light. And they begin resonating certain on a cellular level as well as a molecular level. Now, every other planet's doing the same thing. What we call solar flares or solar storms are nothing really but atmospheric discharges on the sun that generate so much energy that sometimes it disrupts communication. And if you've been following the news, there's been a lot of northern light activity as a result of that more energy to, and that all contributes to what we call cosmic rays. So any spinning object in the universe is generating these plasma discharges that generate hundreds of thousands of harmonics that contribute to this natural energy that we evolved in. So what we're doing is we're mimicking that using the electric fields, or sometimes with the arc rod you'll see the plasma discharge, but we're generating variable frequencies of harmonics so we can actually target it. So in nature, it requires the variability of clouds to generate random sets of hundreds of thousands of harmonics. With the electronics, we can actually target and generate specific hundreds of thousands of harmonics that follow known mathematical principles. We can apply equations to calculate, and we verified through third-party analysis that we're generating those spectrums of frequencies and harmonics. So now you know what frequencies and harmonics you're generating. Now you can target for particular outcomes, which is what our recipes are all about. So our recipes are targeting. So when you understand how things are vibrating on a magnetic resonance spectrum or on a molecular band spectrum, or you can look at the diameter of the cell. So there's a certain diameter of every cell that corresponds to a length that corresponds to a wavelength. So there's multiple different ways you can begin to resonate on a cellular level that again adds energy to the system. And that's really what the uniqueness of the recipes is. Each recipe has generated a unique set of harmonics. And then finally, we have a visible light component. So as I alluded to a little bit earlier, is you have this natural light, not the sunlight, but there's a natural light. And that's really all these gases in the atmosphere. It's really that blue light. So one of the most common questions children ask their parents is what causes the blue in the sky? Many of them may falsely say that it's the reflection of water because the earth is mostly water, but it's actually all these gases in the atmosphere that get excited by that sun's energy that we're talking about, that excites them to fluorescent, and it literally produces thousands of wavelengths in the visible light, in the infrared, far infrared, near infrared, visible light spectrum. So with those different tubes that we had that we've introduced, so we're producing a pretty close to about 1,000 different wavelengths in that infrared, far infrared, near infrared, visible light spectrum. So with the light now, we're adding that other, special sauce that we get outside, which is that natural light component.
So
that was the high level. That was the high level explanation of it. Do you want to go deep?
Right, my brain's blown. But okay, a couple questions. One is, you mentioned ATP. You also mentioned voltage. So when you're talking about low voltage in the body and we need to raise our voltage, is that correlated to an increase in ATP production?
Well, it affects the way that cell is gating. So the idea is when a cell becomes less healthy, there's not enough of that charge potential to trigger and move back and forth the sodium-potassium pump, which is the precursor to ATP in the mitochondria. So if you're not moving those things in and out, you're not uptaking and moving back and forth those positive, negative charges, you're not getting that energy for the mitochondria or the ATP. So it's been proven that you can take these different fields and actually bump that up. There's plenty of scientific evidence that talks about the effects of both PEMF and pulsed electric fields, where you're affecting that either the charge potential around the cell membrane or affecting the cell membrane itself to trigger these healthy cellular functions. Now, it's important you have to have nutrition and other things to move things in and out. So it isn't just a matter of gating it that's important. And I think it's a really good balance, whether it's IVs and things like that. We're finding that people, they respond much better to those just because you're able to really get everything into the nucleus of the cell.